Hey guys! Welcome back to my channel. Since fall is just around the corner, I wanted to show you guys 3 painting ideas inspired by this cozy season that you can recreate. I made them in the shape of cute Polaroids because you guys said you really like this idea, but you can of course choose any size you like. The first idea is this cute and colorful Polaroid picture of maple leaves. The first thing you want to do is sketch out the shape of a maple leaf. Make sure you just lightly sketch it out, or otherwise the lines could be visible later. For this tutorial, I'm going to use hot press watercolor paper because it's great for illustrations and if you want to create small details. Now let's begin with the background first. Distribute a little bit of water all around the leaf and then start adding yellow and red colored paint one by one, making them blend into each other to create different beautiful shades. You don't have to be super precise, we just need a different color texture in the background for now. Keep adding more and more paint on top to make the colors really vibrant and let everything dry. From here we can build depth in the painting by creating a few darker areas here and there. For this step I mix a little bit of brown with red colored watercolor paint to make the red slightly darker and warmer. I wouldn't use black because we still want to keep this red hue. Mix a darker shade with a bright yellow color so you have different shades everywhere. Once you're done with that and the paint has dried, it's time to add some details. To create several leaves in the background, we can now use the negative painting technique that I showed you guys not so long ago. Basically, instead of coloring the leaf, you want to outline it and fill out the rest around it with paint. Here I also added a few leaf veins here and there. You don't have to be super precise with it, we just want them to slightly be visible. I also outlined a few more leaves in the background using the same darker shade that I mixed together earlier. To make the leaves look more realistic, you can also add a little bit of yellow and green colored paint to really capture the different states of the leaf during the fall season. Intensify the darker shades more and more to create even more depth. And once the background has dried, we can move on to the front maple leaf. Here I'm going to use a really bright yellow color and add it to the whole leaf. Next, start adding a little bit of red colored paint to the areas that are close to the edge of the leaf. Add a little bit of red colored paint and then blend it in with a little bit of water and yellow colored paint, but leave out the middle part as here we will add another color later. You don't have to make the transition between the colors really smoothly because the maple leaf doesn't really have a smooth surface. Now you can also add a little bit of green colored paint to the center and blend it out along the veins. Again, you don't have to make the colors super even, so feel free to add a little bit of yellow, red and green here and there and slightly blend them together to create texture. What I also did was, when I added more paint on top of the leaf to make the colors more vibrant, I kept a little bit of space in between the very edge and the new layer of paint. I felt like this made the painting look more interesting and added even more depth to it. For the veins, I used a slightly darker shade of red and applied it really carefully and thinly to the paper. You don't really want them to be super obvious. Once you're happy with the leaf so far, you can let it dry and go back to the background to add even more darker areas following the negative painting technique. What I like about watercolors is that it's really relaxing because you usually work in layers, so you build up the painting slowly and carefully. And you can really see how the whole art piece comes together slowly but surely. So don't forget that it takes time. I think I say that all the time, but it's something we usually forget, and that's why we can get discouraged before we actually finish the painting. So add more and more details to the leaf and let it dry from time to time, and once you're happy, we can remove the tape. Now, if the paint has leaked under the tape, you can use a magic sponge that is usually used for cleaning stains, but it can damage your paper a little bit if it's not thick enough, so be really careful. But what you can use instead is a white pen or white acrylic paint and just carefully cover it up. Let's leave the painting for now and move on to the next painting before we add even more details. Next idea is to paint, of course, pumpkins, because pumpkins are basically the symbol of fall, isn't it? Here again, lightly sketch out the pumpkins wherever you want them to be. And of course, you can use any reference picture if you have difficulties with that. Now, to create the pumpkins, we need to work in layers again. And the first layer is going to be a nice warm yellow color. Here I mix a little bit of red into the bright yellow color paint so it slightly turns into a more orange color. Next, begin by distributing the paint all over the paper but leaving out the stems of each pumpkin, and then let everything dry. If you're impatient, you can also use a hairdryer to make the drying process a lot faster. Now you want to use a slightly darker shade of the same color and carefully apply it all around the edges of the pumpkin. Afterwards, blend the paint following the shape and the curves of the pumpkin to blend it in. We basically just want to build up the intensity and the shadows of the pumpkin layer by layer while keeping a few areas bright as light reflections. From here, repeat the steps. Outline the curves with an even darker shade and blend the paint towards the center, keeping the middle part of the pumpkin slightly brighter. But I also crossed the lighter areas with a few thin lines to create texture. Just don't overdo it or you will only have one color everywhere. As you can see now, we slowly have a few different shades of the same color. The middle part of the curve is lighter, and the lower and the upper part of the pumpkin is darker. But it all depends on the reference picture you use and where the light source is. Once you reach the shade of the shadows, you can start working on building in the very dark shadows underneath and next to the pumpkins by following the curves the same way as we did in the previous steps. In the end, I also added a red glaze on top of a few areas to make the shade slightly more red, but this is optional. And now it's finally time to add the green stems. Here I used a bright shade of green and added a few details on top using a darker shade. Add more and more details until you're happy with the intensity and the transition of the colors. What I also did was I lifted some of the paint with a clean damp brush and a tissue paper. It's also a great way to blend the colors even more to create a really smooth transition in a few areas, but it's really optional. Just giving you some ideas that you can test out. Once you added all the details and you're happy with the result, you can remove the tape. If you have difficulties removing the tape as I have it here, you can simply use a hairdryer again to slightly melt the sticky part underneath and it will work a lot better. As the last step, I added a few additional light reflections with a white pen in a wavy motion, still following the curvy shape, and the painting was finished. But if you want to paint something that is a bit easier but still fall inspired, how about this rather abstract forest and tree scenery capturing all the different colors and states of the trees during the fall season? Begin by applying a wash of blue and yellow colored watercolor paint for the sky and the forest that we are going to paint later, and then let everything dry. Next, load up your brush with dark green, brown or black color paint and start dabbing it onto the paper, creating random dots and lines along the horizon. Here I use a very thin brush to make the dots as small as possible. These are going to be the green pine trees far away that go up the hill. You can also add a few additional dots to the sky as I do it here on the right side if you want to create a mountain later. I also lightly blended out the paint into the sky to make the area of the forest a little bit foggy, but this is optional. Repeat the step, but this time add dots using yellow, red and green to the lower part of the painting to create trees in different colors. Add more and more paint to the different areas to intensify the colors and to create depth by creating a variety of different shades of color to represent the fall season. And since the sky was a little bit too pale, I added another layer of blue color paint on top. You can also add additional pine trees like I did here, but this is optional. I also added a few more shadows using the darker brown color to a few areas to create even more depth and to make the painting look more interesting. Super simple way, but it still looks super cool. And this is how the 3 paintings look in the end. If you want, you can also add a few white details to the paintings. Here I used a white pen and a few white lines to a few maple leaves to create light reflections, and to the third painting to add a few brighter areas and snow to my small mountain in the background. Let me know in the comments what was your favorite painting, and don't forget to share your artwork with me with the hashtag #LookMako so I can feature you in one of my videos. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up to support this channel, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and to click on the bell to get notified when I upload a new video every Saturday. Thank you so much for watching guys, have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye!